Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Today I am coming to you from Jakarta. I am taking a little trip to Indonesia, and I'm in the hotel room right now. And much like how when you went to Vegas, you were in the mood for a Vegas horror movie. Craig and I have been talking about doing this Indonesian horror movie for a little while, and it just seemed appropriate to delay it until I could give you the Indonesian perspective.
Yep.
Well, at least.
Yeah, but you've been there, just for a couple of days, right?
Yeah, I've only been here since, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 5th and final day here.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to actually be moving on to Japan after this, so I don't know. If you want, next week we could do a Japanese horror movie.
Well, maybe, but I'm curious. I know as close to nothing about Indonesia as a person can know. So,
oh yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Jakarta as a city is probably one of the last places people actually go to when they go to Indonesia. I'm here visiting a friend and her family, but actually, Indonesia, believe it or not, I think it's the 3rd most populous country in the world.
Okay.
It is full of people, but, it's not like you can tell. It just looks like a big city here in Jakarta. In fact, the traffic's not that bad. It's a very modern city here, and it's extremely hot and humid, and so it seems to be, as my friend described it to me, mostly shopping malls.
Okay.
You go from one shopping mall to the other, stay in the air conditioning, There's outdoor food places that are kind of fun to go to. But most people, when they come to Indonesia, they'll go to, like, Bali, which is a more of a resort area. I think it's a very popular place for my Chinese friends and my expat friends in China to go to on vacation. Australians, because of its proximity, often come up to Bali for vacation. It pretty much all over Asia, Bali is seen as sort of like the Hawaii, the place you go to.
Sure.
And it's an interesting country. Like right now, Ramadan is happening. Indonesia has sort of historically been, they were originally colonized by the Dutch. Now they're not anymore, obviously, and it's quite a mix of Muslim, Hindu, Christian population.
Interesting.
Quite a few Chinese who came over as refugees from some of the persecution that the Chinese had undergone in different parts of Asia. And so, yeah, it's quite a mix, actually, quite a cultural mix and quite a religious mix. And like I said, because Ramadan's going on right now, like, places are closed.
Oh, yeah.
That started, 2 days ago? Restaurants and things are still open. Saw the Mario movie yesterday. It's a big treat for me to, living in China, to get to the cinema and actually see something, because so few Western movies come through there nowadays. But yeah, when my friend, I have this dear friend who's Indonesian, and when she learned that I had this horror podcast, she said, oh my God, she said, Indonesia makes amazing horror movies.
I've read that now. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
I don't think we've ever done an Indonesian movie before.
This is the first one. I think, they get overshadowed by the K-horror and the J-horror, when it comes to Asia. Indonesia apparently has this very long history of horror movies, and quite scary.
That's what I hear.
Very superstitious people, as she tells me. Everybody's kind of seems to believe in ghosts, and a lot of the Indonesian horror movies are ghost stories. They have lots of different legends of particular ghosts and urban legends and these kinds of things. And so this movie, she said, is very much in the wheelhouse of a typical Indonesian horror. What we're doing is 2017's Satan's Slaves, which is a remake of a 1980s horror movie. I was really toying between doing the original, but I thought it might be a little more interesting to kick off with this one since it is a little more modern.
Yeah.
I was looking at some clips where I saw a trailer for the original. It did actually look pretty freaky.
This is a remake, but also a remake / prequel, right? Because since this movie was made, they have made a sequel, and what I read is that there's another one planned, I think, but that they are all supposed to be tied together.
Yes.
I think ultimately the original movie is supposed to be the last movie sequentially.
Yeah, they all focus around this particular house, I guess.
But yeah.
the director, Joko Anwar, is about our age. He grew up watching horror and wanting to do genre films. And the success of this one, which was one of his first in the horror genre anyway, really kind of cemented his resolve and his success in order to go on and make several others. And he's pretty active and working right now. I think one of the big faces of Indonesian horror. And I guess it also kind of kicked off a kind of a remake thing. Like after he remade this, a whole bunch of other older Indonesian horror movies were getting remade, not just by him, but by other directors here. So there's like a little trend for a while.
I love stories like this. Like, he loved this movie when he was a kid, and it had always kind of been his dream to remake it. And what I read was that it was already in the works. Like, some studio or something already was planning a remake, but somehow he weaseled his way in and he got his hands on it and he got to remake it. I love stories like that.
Apparently, like, he snuck into a movie theater to watch it when he was a kid. That's how special the movie is to him.
Yeah.
It's a cool story, right?
It is a cool story.
The movie itself was giving me a bit of the Conjuring vibes, especially originally. I don't know why. It's also kind of like your typical haunted house ghost story.
Yeah.
Kind of a mix, actually. I thought this would be very J-horror, or something like that. I don't know why. I just kind of tend to figure that, the Asian cultures have these sort of similar ideas of what ghosts are and what they would be from. But this was a bit different. I actually got to watch this movie with her, so she was telling me different things that I wouldn't have been aware of otherwise culturally, so I'll be able to kind of...
Well, I'm fascinated by that because it really is a very kind of typical haunted house story. There are elements of, like, Rosemary's Baby or any other satanic cult type movie, but I think the thing that I was most interested about, and so I'm really excited to talk to you about it because maybe you can shed some light, are the specifically Indonesian elements of it. Because in the end of the movie, I'm not spoiling anything, it's a ghost story, folks, but in the end of the movie there are like these entities. I don't know. I had I not been listening to the dialogue, would have probably thought that they were meant to be zombies. But I actually looked up what they are, and they are a specific type of ghost that's specific to that culture, which I would have never known. Did you all talk about that at all?
We did a little bit. I mean, she's told me about, like, just ghosts in Indonesia in general, and she said, a lot of people here do believe in ghosts, and they believe that there's this particular, like, the scariest one, sort of like the La Llorona of Indonesia, where there's a woman who is dressed in white and has this long black hair and all that, and if you see her, and if she sees that you see her, you're pretty much gone. And I've seen, like, prank videos that are on, like, YouTube and stuff where people have, like, dressed up like her and, like, just been up in a tree while somebody's walking down the road and waiting for, makes a little noise. There's kind of like a screeching noise. And then when they look up and see her, like, if people, like, flipped out. It's kind of, it's cruel and funny at the same time. Yeah, I don't know all the, you might even know a little more of the details, though, than I do, so it'll be kind of good for you to tell me, because I didn't actually look that up.
No, I don't know. I was just, like, I just Googled, what are the zombies in Satan's Slaves? I don't know. I remember they had a name. I wanted to say it started with an N, and I looked it up at the time, but... in all honesty, I watched this movie a few days ago, so I don't remember exactly. Maybe I'll figure it out before we're done. But I had actually heard of this movie before because Shudder pushed it pretty heavy. I think that they got the exclusive rights to it, so they will claim it as a Shudder original or a Shudder exclusive. I think they just got the rights to it. But there is a sequel, and Shudder may have actually been involved in the production of that one. I don't know. They're both Shudder exclusives. But when the sequel came out, they pushed them both pretty hard. So I had heard of them, but I have to be in a pretty specific mood to watch a foreign film. I do, but I have to be in a particular mood. So I hadn't watched this yet, but I'm glad now to have seen it. I liked it. I will say that I think that it was a pretty traditional ghost story. I definitely see why you would compare it to The Conjuring. It also centers around a family, so like The Conjuring, it also reminded me a little bit of Insidious.
Yeah. Even
Poltergeist, because you've got this tight family element. In fact, it reminded me very much of Poltergeist, because at one point in the movie, somebody who is advising this family who has been being plagued, being haunted by these ghosts, somebody tells them they're going to try to split you up. Your strength is in your unity. You have to stay together. And that's an essential element of Poltergeist too.
Yes, that's right.
So it reminded me of those things. I'm a little bit nervous to talk about it because my ultimate judgment is I think this is a good movie. Did I love it? I thought it was fine. And I think that it's well made and it's a good ghost story. There was nothing particular about it that made me say, oh, wow, this is fantastic. But that could also be a cultural thing.
Well,
I don't know. So
I think that for me, I had a similar feeling. I was really into it although it felt, I mean, I even hesitate to say it felt like I'd seen this before because, like, pretty much all the horror movies I see, I feel like I've seen before.
Right.
Like, there has not been much novel. I mean, it's just, they're mostly ghost stories, and this especially, like you said, mine's very similar territory to Western films we've seen, possession films, kind of across cultures, all kind of end up, in a similar way. I found it very spooky. I found it very creepy and scary. There are quite a few jump scares in there. And then about 3/4 of the way through, I felt like it kind of went off the rails. I felt like the story was going in a particular direction, and then for almost no particular reason other than, I don't know, the desire to throw in a twist, there's a twist that just kind of comes out of left field. And it's not like ooh, wow, that's amazing. Well, anyway, we'll talk about it when we get there. But I needless to say, I was just a little more disappointed in the last, 20 minutes of the movie than I was with the first, hour and 20 minutes. So
cool. Yeah, we can talk about it as we go.
As we go.
I don't know how you want to approach it because the story is really pretty simple, right?
Yeah, it's also period, which I kind of liked. It was cool that it starts out in the 1981, I thought.
I don't think that I would have even noticed that if I hadn't known going in that it was set in the 80s.
Well,
again, we're talking about a different country, so I know very much what the 80s were like in America, but I don't have any idea what they were like in Indonesia. Yeah, there is less technology. Technology doesn't really play much of a role in the movie at all.
No cell phones, anything like that.
Right, so people are potentially more isolated, and these people are more isolated because this house that they live in is kind of out in the country, right?
Yeah, it's this huge A-frame house. Even looking at the house from the outside, was like, this is almost like an Indonesian Amityville, right? Look to it. But yeah, it's kind of a house a bit out in the rural area. Obviously, like here in Jakarta, everything looks modern and new. There's sections of town that are, obviously a little older and whatnot, but generally speaking, I even thought it was pretty handy for him to set this out in a rural area because then you have less work to do, to try to get the older cars and things in there. I even read that they had to search quite a bit to find some of the
months, I think.
For the city scenes, like the scenes where they go to some apartments in the city, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's true. They also had to search for this house location.
Yes.
I think that they wanted to use the original house from the original movie, which apparently is still standing, I guess.
Wow.
But the owner wouldn't let them, so they had to find another place. But I don't know. I don't even know that all I can say about the setting is that the house is, it's appropriately spooky as it should be, but kind of as all ghost story movie houses are. Like, I kept wanting them to turn the lights on. Like, just turn on the lights.
Right.
And it also, it's a really dark movie. Now, I had to watch it on my phone, which sucks. So it was especially dark for me. But it is a dark movie in a lot of it. So, it's atmospherically good in that way. It's also conveniently directly adjacent to a cemetery.
Right. Go figure, right? Like the house has a cemetery on its grounds.
Yeah.
out in the forest, out in the woods, out in the jungle, I suppose you could say. Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's a fine enough setting for it. Like you said, isolated. It really helps, especially later in the movie, that it's next to a cemetery.
Right. But there's a little bit of supernatural exposition, I guess. Like when it opens up, like over the credits. By the way, I watched the dub version. Did you watch the dubbed or did you read the subtitles?
I read the subtitles. Yeah, that's just
Okay,
my
well,
speed.
good. We could. I know. I used to be that way too. I just have gotten old and lazy. And to be fair, the dubbing on this is just okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's just okay. But it starts out, you hear a woman's voice chanting what translates to "Charms of the king and queen come to me, send the children," and just chanting that over and over again. But then the exposition sets this up as though it is a family drama.
Yes.
It's about this, I don't know what class they would fall into, because the mother had been a famous singer. She has been ill for over 3 years, and the first scene we see is her oldest daughter, Rini, talking to, I don't know, an executive, I suppose, about royalties, and the executive tells her that there are no more royalties, and the daughter's like, I don't get it. I hear her songs on the radio, I see her albums in the stores. How can there be no royalties? And he's like, well, there just aren't. Yeah. And that made me really mad. I was like, this guy is lying to you.
He's totally lying.
So regardless of how her mother's fame may have allowed them to live at some point, they're not wealthy now, and they're struggling to just get by. Mm-hmm. And it's her dad, her mom, who is bedridden, and she has three younger brothers. There's Tony, who is the next after her, and then Bondi, and then Ian, who is deaf and speaks in sign language.
And he's like 6 or 5 years old, I think.
6. He's 6 because he's turning 7.
Yes, that's right. And their grandmother, her dad lives with them as well, obviously. And then their grandmother is in a wheelchair, and she doesn't speak much at all.
Not much, right. But that's fairly typical in many places other than America, that
everyone lives together.
Grandparents, right? Everybody lives together, and so we've got this, established that they are in trouble. They are in financial trouble, and the dad says he's going to go off to try to earn some money in the city. The oldest brother sells his motorbike, and they're also kind of caring for their mother. Tony seems to have a particular bond with her. He combs her hair at night. But then weird stuff starts happening. Rini finds Mama out of bed, but it's not really her, and I think that was a dream. But then the same exact thing that just happened repeats, but then it is Mama, and she drops dead.
This was explained to me too. Well, there's a series of things that happens, and I thought actually the movie did this fantastic job of jumping you right into this family and its plight. Everything
it's paced really well.
Yeah, 10 minutes in, and you've already 5 minutes in really, and you really understand exactly what's happening. Like you said, their house is mortgaged, their savings are gone. Dad's going away to get some money, but I'm not exactly sure how.
I assumed he would be working, but that was an assumption.
Yeah, it was some little project. And then I think also right away, as soon as she kind of comes home and goes upstairs to see her mom in bed, there's some spooky camera angles, and the camera work here is very unsettling. I thought that was a little unique to this movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, horror movies have got some creepy camera work, but the way that this camera, when things get intense, it floats and it cantilevers slightly. And it does this in just this noticeably disturbing way, I thought, that was very effective. And before anything creepy is even going on, we're getting this as she goes upstairs to see her mom for the first time.
Explain what that means to me, like I'm stupid.
Oh,
cantilever mean?
Well, the camera is sort of handheld at this point, but not bouncy, jumpy handheld, documentary style, but very smooth, steady cam style. But the movement is a little more deliberate and slow, and as it moves, the camera tips so that it's no longer horizontal, so that, it's tipping kind of sideways a little bit in either direction. And just the way that it did that, I thought was it triggered me a little bit. I don't know, just kind of like psychologically. And there were several times in this movie where the camera just starts at that horizontal position and then slowly cantilevers for no good reason at all. And it's creepy. It's a bit of a Sam Raimi trick, honestly. He likes to do this thing a lot, and I felt like there was quite a bit of inspiration from Sam Raimi going on in some of the cinematography here.
I can see that. Well, that's why out of the gate I said I think it's a good movie. I think that it's skillfully made. The cinematography looks good. It is dark in places, but it does look really good. And I think that the acting is great. I was totally in this. I thought everybody was really good, especially when you're working with kids. Now, to be fair, the youngest boy doesn't have a whole lot to do, but they're young actors, and it's good. And I was invested in their story. I felt for them, and I was curious as to what was going on and why. And I feel like the movie adequately describes that or explains that.
Yeah,
but it's suspenseful and well paced. You don't get a third act exposition dump.
Yes.
You learn things as you go, and it's interesting and suspenseful.
And like you said earlier, it's very much plays like a family drama at first. It's this family that's just dealing with this very sick mother, and they've got money problems. And throughout that, very naturally, we get a great exposition, or we just get to, through the actions of what's going on, we really get to learn about this family and their family dynamic, and they just come across really, relatable and understandable, and we see how everybody relates to each other and what role everyone has. Like, it's really smooth, and we don't often get that, honestly, good character development in horror movies, and we do here, so it's quite nice. But it's like you said, it's like a bunch of scary, freaky things are happening before mom dies.
Spooky stuff. Yeah, like
her mom rings a bell, right, when she needs something.
Right.
She's not talking. She looks, almost like she's starving, and looks kind of freaky anyway. She's just pale, and she's very thin, and sunken eyes.
They never say, at least that I recall, what is wrong with her. She's just very, very ill,
right.
and then she dies. Now, of course, we come to find out that there potentially could be supernatural reasons that she's ill, or maybe, I don't know when to reveal what, but there is outside stuff going on. There is weird stuff going on. And like you said, spooky stuff, like ghostly figures lingering in the background. Lots of suspense shots where the camera will pan across somebody's face in close-up, but then as it pans, you see in soft focus in the back a creepy figure lingering.
Yeah, that happens.
Then they will turn around and it won't be there anymore, but then maybe they'll turn around and it will be there. Like, typical stuff.
It's classic stuff.
It's typical haunted ghost stuff, but done well. It is spooky.
Well, I think one of the scariest moments, of course, she's got this bell, so it's established that she rings this bell, and so, it goes upstairs. At one point, I think the very first time we're introduced to her, Rini goes up and sits down on her bed, but her mom is, like, ringing this bell frantically, and she's staring up at the ceiling, or maybe out the window, but it looks almost like up at the ceiling, and Rini kind of looks up, and she's a little freaked out by the intensity by which her mom seems to see something. And then, like, Tony goes up to comb her mom's hair, which she's losing. The window blows open, and when he goes to close the window and turns around, she's looking at her weird. And then, one of the scariest moments, I think, in this sequence is it's night, and Rainey wakes up. Is walking through the house, sees her dad sleeping on the sofa. She goes upstairs. Again, very unsettling camera angles. And from behind, she sees her mom standing looking out the window. Again, like this classic setup, as she's approaching her mom, you're thinking, okay, like, is that really her mom? What's going to happen when she turns around and sees her face? She touches her shoulder, but then she hears the bell ringing. And when she turns around, she sees her mom is laying in bed, ringing the bell frantically. And then this figure slowly turns sideways. And it appears to be her mom, like a younger, healthier version of her mom, but she's got this really evil grin on her face. And then when she wakes up again, boom, it's like the same scenario. She wakes up, she hears the bell ringing, she walks through, she sees her dad. My friend explained this to me, said that this is actually kind of like one of these Indonesian beliefs, like if you dream something and then we wake up during the day and the same thing is experienced, that there's a ghost involved.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, because it happens at least a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
The best jump scare for me was you had mentioned, or I did, I don't remember. Tony, the oldest son, would comb his mother's hair. Like that was like their bonding thing or whatever. And after she passes away, he wakes up in the night and thinks that he hears her ringing. He rolls over in bed or something, and he hears really, really loud, "Tony, comb my hair."
Yes.
And,
oh, God.
And it may, this is one of the only benefits of having to watch it on my phone, was because I had my earbuds in. So I could tell that the sound mix was great here, because that line came through so loudly from behind my right side. It sounded like somebody was behind me. and I did jump. Again, I mean, little things like that, technical things, really can make a big difference. And had I not had my earbuds in, maybe I wouldn't have noticed, unless I had been in a good theater, with a good sound system. But yeah, it spooked me out. It was good.
Yeah, it's real creepy. Well, the second time around, that figure in real life is actually her mom. Her mom's bed is empty. And that's when her mom collapses into her arms, and they have a funeral. Her dad rushes in, the whole family's crying. The Muslim burial tradition is that you wrap the body in white, and then you lower it into the grave and you expose its face.
I didn't know that. I was curious.
Yeah, that was also explained to me. And then because of that, there's also an Indonesian ghost that sort of hops around, that is still sort of kind of wrapped and hops, which would be
okay. Yeah, now that I think about it, I think that at the end, when they are besieged by these supernatural creatures, I think they're wrapped in their white shrouds.
Exactly.
Come to think of it.
Yeah, it's all kind of death, funeral type stuff. And then Bondi is reciting this thing that we heard about earlier, that his friend told him, that if once the last family member walks 40 steps from the grave after the burial, the body wakes up, realizes it's dead, and then dies again. There's a Muslim prayer group in the house, but it's clear that this family is not, it's just understated that this family is not religious, because there's a few comments here and there. There's Muslim prayer group is going on inside the house after the funeral, and I think it's Tony are just sitting there as these guys are praying. And Dad even mentions to Bondi, I think, that his family isn't into superstition, so he doesn't need to be afraid about his room, because he is a little afraid at times. They're just getting a little creeped out here and there. And then Dad has to leave the house to go and raise money, and it's also conveniently mentioned that their phone is disconnected because they have the money problem. So here you go, classic situation: no phone, isolation, graveyard nearby, Dad's gone, and it's just these 4 kids in the house now getting along, and immediately scary things are happening. Bondi gets up out of bed. He shares a room actually with Ian, and actually I really like their dynamic.
I did too.
It's that typical, the youngest kids, maybe a little closer in age, sharing the room together, and Ian speaks in sign language the whole time. And they all seem to know quite a bit of sign language, but especially Bondi and him, just basically talk back and forth from their twin beds that are across the room. And there's a window there, and he wakes up and sees somebody walking around in the graveyard with a flashlight. And Tony gets up, was listening to his radio in bed, and his radio is playing his mom's song, and he turns it to another station, and then it kind of mysteriously goes back to his mom's song, and then he turns it back again, and then it almost sounds like it's giving, I don't know if this was supposed to be like earlier discussions their family had, or something that his mom was talking, or something like that. It seems to be coming over the radio.
I didn't know, because those in the version that I watched, the dubbed version, those parts were not dubbed.
Oh, they weren't translated, huh?
No, they weren't translated, nor were there subtitles. So I had no idea what was going on there.
Yeah, something like that. But then, he hears his mom's bell ringing, and so he goes upstairs into his mom's room and sees the bell that just kind of falls from the bed. And then the plumbing stops working. So they have this well that is in kind of a little house attached to the house, right?
I didn't understand that at all. Like, okay, I can, they've got a well. All right, fine. Why was that also their bathroom? Like every time they have to pee, they go take a piss right next to the well. Like,
That's gross.
Probably wouldn't be what I would do.
Yeah. Apparently, especially like if you're boys out kind of in the woods or whatever, like this isn't atypical, and then you just take some water and you just kind of dump it across the floor and it just kind of washes into the ground.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get it. Like when we're talking about a well, like this is like a big,
it's huge
well.
Yeah.
It's I would say probably 4 or 5 feet in diameter. It's stone. It's dug way down. At some point, we end up down in there with somebody, and like the water's clean. I'm sure it's all fine. I would just feel weird about pissing right next to my water supply.
Right. That's a good point. All right. Well, it's sort of like their washroom. So there's a well on one side. There's sort of a tub on the other side. Obviously, the whole place is plumbed, but for some reason the water's not working, and they can just drop a bucket in and get some water anyway. It's pretty convenient, I suppose, to have it attached to the house. At first I thought, they actually had to go outside for it, but it's just right there. There's like a door at the end of the hallway that you go through that leads straight into that room, and that room is suitably spooky. I mean, the minute I saw this room, I'm like, all right, we're going to have some well scenes. Yep, We're going to have some spooky well scenes, which seems to be par for the course in modern horror films, especially Asian horror, when since the Ring.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Those two boys sharing a room, Bondi looking over at Ian in the night, in the dark, that was so reminiscent to me of something else. And of course, there are lots of movies where siblings share rooms and weird things.
Something Wicked This Way Comes, something like that.
Yeah, well, right. And one of the Conjuring or two of the Conjuring movies, I don't know. There are lots of them, but it reminded me of something so much, and I can't think what. But atmospherically, it's great. It's very spooky and it's very ghosty. And the mom dies and they are seeing weird ghostly figures around. And then creepy stuff is happening, and the grandma gets up in the middle of the night or something, and the next thing we know, somebody finds her dead at the bottom of the well, and they're like, oh, she must have just slipped and fell in there, right. I guess.
Grandma who doesn't really walk.
Yeah. and then weird things continue to happen, and I think that for a while they think that grandma is haunting them.
Yeah.
But then I think that later on they think, wait, maybe she wasn't haunting us, maybe she was trying to warn us, or maybe she was trying to protect us in some way. There are also these ancillary characters.
Yes.
Is he a priest or something that moves in?
Yeah, or later.
Next to them, like right before mom dies or right after mom dies or something.
Ustad is a term for teacher, and he's obviously, I don't know, originally I kind of thought he was maybe an imam or something, but he's like a Muslim, almost like the Muslim father, the Muslim pastor, who seems to be a good friend of the family, and he has a son.
Right.
Who's the son?
Hendra's the son, and he's probably about Reenie's age, and they kind of, strike up a conversation at the mom's funeral. And so they're there. Reenie, when things start getting weird, they can get information from him and some guidance from him. He's more really just kind of I don't know. He comforts them. He doesn't really do a whole lot. He's just kind of a source of comfort. But after the grandma dies, they also find this letter that she had written and addressed but not sent. And so they take it to the address and they deliver it to this weird guy. And I guess in the letter she was asking this guy to save her family, and it turns out this weird old man is a friend of grandma's, and he tells them this story about how the grandmother the grandmother is the mother of the dad, I think, didn't bless the son's marriage because one of them was infertile. The mom was infertile,
yeah, I think, well, number one, because the son was an artist, and so, she didn't really approve, and number two, because they couldn't.
Whose mom was she? Was she the mom's mom or the dad's mom?
She was the mom's mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. So she didn't approve of the wedding. The grandma, this old guy just tells us this. Okay, the grandma believed that Mama didn't ask God for her children, but asked Satan.
Yes. It's a bit hokey.
It is. And that's the first time we're introduced to this notion, which ultimately is true, but that's just, maybe she didn't ask God, she asked Satan. We'll come back to that. Put a pin in that.
Put a pin in that.
We'll come back to it later.
It might be important. Who knows? But instead of giving him the whole spiel, he hands him a magazine, her a magazine, and says, "Read my article about it."
Oh my God, that was so funny to me. Like, here, I wrote an article in this magazine. Read it. It so sounded to me like you should listen to my podcast.
Right. Right. Or some douchebag who doesn't want to answer questions. Like, I tell you what, I answered all this in my book. Go buy a copy and read it, and then if you have more questions, get back to me. It's hilarious.
It to me, more than that, it seemed like he was really proud of the fact that he had like published this article in this magazine, and he thought that was going to be really helpful to her. What I have next to my notes, and I don't even remember how it transitions to this, but we see the two little boys in their room, I think, and Bondi, maybe they're not in their room, I don't know, but we see Bondi and he's chanting over and over to himself, "I don't want to kill my little brother. I love my brother." And he just keeps saying it over and over again.
Yes.
So something weird is going on.
Yeah, and it's just a sudden change, really, in Bondi. It's quite sudden, and it's pretty creepy. He's staring at him creepily. Ian's watching TV, and he's behind him, just kind of staring at him. One of the scariest moments, I think, is when they're laying in bed, and it might have been just after what you mentioned. Boy, does the camera play with you. I mean, you know something freaky is going to happen with Bondi. You're just not sure what it is, and so it's that classic bit where we get a close-up on Ian, and he turns away from him in bed, and then he kind of turns back to him, and I'm just waiting for something, once the camera pans right back up, what's Bondi going to be doing, or is he going to be standing next to the bed, or, what's the deal? Bondi is laying in bed, and his eyes are closed. He's clearly asleep or pretending to be asleep, and he is signing in his sleep, very deliberately, over and over for Ian, "I want you to die."
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Oh, Jesus, that was, I thought, one of the freakiest parts of the whole movie.
That is creepy. Well, and I hated that. Like, obviously there's something going on. Obviously some outside force is affecting Bondi, but I hated that because they had so well...
They were so
It's just good filmmaking. Friends. Yeah, they've established that this family is tight, and Bondi and Ian, especially the two youngest brothers, are really close, and direction, acting, writing, all comes together. Like, I'm invested in this family, and the fact that Bondi is struggling against this, whatever it is that's trying to sway him, to manipulate him, he's fighting it. Oh, it kind of just tore at my heartstrings.
Yeah,
it was good.
It was horrible. I mean, he's the most vulnerable kid in the whole movie, and so especially the fact.
But nobody's ever really worried about him. Like, he suffers it on his own. Like, nobody knows that this is going on.
Exactly, and he's a strong kid too. I mean, it's kind of surprising how much he can take without like making a big deal out of it. And then there's just some kind of random odd stuff that I almost wonder like maybe would be explored in a sequel. Or there's a record of her mom's that was put on the record player quite a while ago, and she's playing it. As it's going around, she notices the label is coming off, and when she looks at it more closely, she realizes that under the label there was another little track to the record.
A hidden track,
and so she starts playing it, but it doesn't make sense, but then it sounds like backwards talk, and so then she spins the record backwards, which is, this classic thing as well.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it was saying, really.
I don't either, because, again, not dubbed or subtitled, so I didn't know if it was saying anything.
But eventually, far too late in my opinion, but she decides to go ahead and read that article.
I know, that's so funny to me. Like he gives it to her, and she looks at it and is like, okay, but then she takes it home and waits a while to read it,
and then it's like,
and then when she reads it, it like totally lays it out. It's hilarious. Like, it's they're talking about it, and she's explaining it, I think, to Tony or whatever his name is, and she's like, it says that it's the story of satanic fertility cults, and they make deals with these women who can't have kids, but the bargain is like they'll give them children, but the last born child must be surrendered to the cult so that they can sacrifice him when he reaches 7 years old. And Tony's like, wait a second, how old are you? And she's like 21 or something, and he's like, well, I'm 15 and Bondi's 11 or something. She's like,
they're all 6 years apart.
They're all about 6 years apart. So before she got sick, Mama always had another baby before the youngest could turn 7. That was not really a great plan.
Right? Mama, how long can you keep this up?
That is not a sustainable... but whatever. Clever. And then they're like, wait a second. Well, first Tony's like, God, I remember going to like Mom's events, like her concerts and stuff when she was young, and there are always these weird people there. and then he's like, wait a second, doesn't Ian turn 7 in 3 days?
Right.
And yes, but there is a stipulation that the child can only be taken if the family willingly gives him up.
Yeah.
But if he is taken, then he'll be taken by the living dead, which is what happens. And then lots of other creepy stuff happens. Grandma's wheelchair moves around by itself. God, I don't know how much of this you want to talk about, because it's just a bunch of creepy stuff.
Yeah, it basically is, yeah. Well, this woman is appearing everywhere, which it seems like the teacher, Ustad's son, seems to think is a evil entity, that it just looks like her mother, but is not actually their mother. According to the article, they can't defeat the creature, but they can disobey their rules, like you said, by not giving them up. And also, one thing that's mentioned in the article is that the women in the cult are impregnated by the men in the cult.
Yeah, they don't reveal that until later. Like, I feel like Tony just randomly brings that up later.
It's just kind of
by the way.
Isn't it weird that we all look different from each other? This totally explains it.
See, which all along... Okay, so at that point, I guess I hadn't really thought about it all along. It really was at this point specifically that I thought, what does the dad know about all this?
Yes, exactly.
Like, if all of the children are fathered by different men... It seems weird that he wouldn't know anything.
Yeah, I was definitely wondering, why is Dad gone?
Yeah, why is he gone? That's a good question, but he does come back eventually.
The preacher's son, the guy whose name starts with the H, he eventually goes back to that old man, and this is where things I thought got kind of silly, because we're seeing all of this stuff where Ian is definitely in peril. Bondi is still menacing him. It looks like he's gonna, get it. He kind of steals a knife, but then the knife gets found, and all this stuff. He's still looking creepy. And then the preacher's son goes to the old man, and the old man's like, "There's a new development. Here is my latest article. It's unpublished, but you need to give it to the family right now." And he hands him this letter. I thought that was such a contrivance, honestly.
Oh, this whole sequence. Oh, I know, it's silly, but the whole sequence was very The Omen.
Yeah.
Anybody who is involved in this is gonna, to be fair, this is great. Like, so the guy, Hendra or whatever his name is, takes the magazine, and he's riding a motorbike, right? And he's taking it, and he gets not just hit by a truck, but run over, and it's one of the most realistic looking,
oh my God,
accidents that I've ever seen.
I thought
it looked like it could have been. I mean, how would a camera ever have been placed at that angle to show it? But it looked so real.
Every bit of it looks real.
Really good.
He gets hit, he gets run over, and then he gets dragged under the car for a little bit first, and
you see it, like you see his face being dragged along the pavement. Oh, it just looks terrible. And then they carry his body back to his father, and you don't see too much of the aftermath. But oh boy, I just thought that was super effective. It had that same kind of realism of those same type of supernatural accidents in The Omen.
You're right. It's very The Omen.
It felt very real and very violent.
And then Dad's home. And he says, tomorrow we're going to pack up our things and we're moving to an apartment downtown.
Yep.
But this is when Renee approaches Dad, because she's having the same idea we are, right? About the night her mom died. Because there was an earlier scene where Dad actually said something to the mother. It was way back early in the movie when Mom was still alive, and so you don't think much of it. But what he had said to her, if you wrote it down, because I had, was, please spare the children, something like that. And he's real coy about it. He won't really tell her what he said. But at this point, all hell starts breaking loose because Ian's going to the bathroom and the door slams, and they find him down in the well, and Dad dives in after him.
Oh, that was spooky. Dad breaks open the door just in time to see that ghostly woman pulling Ian down into the well. And then Dad dives in there and looks around underwater and eventually pulls him up. But you're right. I don't remember like the exact sequence, but they're all packed up. They're going to be leaving, but their car never arrives. Mm-hmm. And they just shrug that off like, I guess they must have got tied up or something. I'm thinking, no, this is terrible. This is his birthday night.
Yes, they're going to celebrate his birthday at midnight in the
At midnight, right. Yeah. They were going to in their new home. But now they're not in their new home. They're in the old home. And, of course, midnight comes around. Again, lots and lots of spooky stuff that we're skipping over. But eventually they look out and all of these things are coming towards the house. Now, first, it's like the cult members gather around the house.
Yeah, they all have umbrellas.
All these people shrouded in black. And I don't remember how they get them to leave. I think they just beg them to leave. Mm-hmm. And then you see the cult members, all of them, reach out their hands and drop something onto the ground. I thought they were scattering dirt. I didn't know what it was. So then they're still there. Maybe that's the night before his birthday or something. I don't know. But then the night of his birthday, they read again. I think they get somehow that new article, that new information, and it says that the cult members don't actually collect the child. The cult members just mark the spot where he can be found. And it turns out that they had dropped these red seeds.
Yes.
All around the house.
I have a bracelet made from these seeds. I haven't seen these seeds in years. I think I got it in Hong Kong or something. It's just these beautiful little red seeds that you can make.
They are.
So that was kind of an interesting element. And then it turns out, again, according to his new article, that last child is actually
the Antichrist, basically.
The Antichrist. Like, none of this suddenly makes sense anymore. I was on board with the story up to that point because it was all quite straightforward and spooky, and again, kind of like what we've heard before. Now, why is the last son the Antichrist?
Well, and they never use that word, to be fair.
Yeah.
They say the son of Satan, but I was still very, not confused, but interested because they're not Christian, so...
Yeah. I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, Satan's there anyway. It's going to take the son.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the Muslim faith.
Well, they're not Muslim
even
either.
The titles.
They have no... Oh, the cult. Yeah, the cult is...
Well, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. But
Satanic,
whatever. They're
buddy.
Satan's slaves.
Satan's. It's Satan.
It's Satan. So they're there, like, at night, and now Ian is acting weird. First of all, he can talk now. So...
Oh, that was freaky.
That was freaky when he started talking. And I was also very impressed with that very, very young actor. I would guess that kid was maybe 6. Mm-hmm. Super young. I don't know if... I know nothing about him. I don't know if he actually is deaf and they dubbed his voice, but I mean, he seemed to be pretty proficient in sign language. That could just be coaching too. I don't know. But it was very unsettling when he just started talking, and he starts talking when all of this crazy, scary stuff is going on, and he's gleeful.
Yeah.
So you really kind of come to realize this kid is not who or what we thought he was, or at least he's not anymore.
Which comes out of left field. I mean, it's either one or the other, right? Either he's being taken by this cult and he's in danger, or he's actually not in danger because he's going to willingly go to the cult anyway because he's actually Satan's seed. You know, I just thought that last twist was like a little disappointing at how sudden it was. It got a little nonsensical at that point.
Well, it does seem that he goes to them willingly. Now, what I've been trying to get to is after the cult, then whether it's later that night or the next night or whatever, around, the time of his 7th, midnight, his 7th birthday or whatever, then... That's when the supernatural entities start to approach en masse. And it seems like they're coming out of the cemetery. It looked very much to me like Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
That's what it looks like. Mm. But I did find these entities are, and I have no idea how to pronounce this, but they are Pakong. which is a Javanese ghost that is said to be the soul of a dead person trapped in their shroud. Known in Indonesia as kain, kafan, the shroud is the prescribed length of cloth used in Muslim burials to wrap the body of the dead person, and there's more to it than that. And I didn't even notice this, but apparently one of these pokong is Hendra, the kid who got run over.
I didn't notice
So there are
that.
even familiar faces. So there's kind of this showdown, and ultimately, and this didn't surprise me, I kind of felt it going this way, they get the kid.
Yeah. The kid basically goes to them, more or less. Yeah. They get him, and he goes away. He almost like waves goodbye gleefully to the family.
And then the grandma's friend, I think, shows up out of nowhere and just throws them all in his van, and there's like a tense moment where you don't know if his van's going to start, and the ghosts are outside, and then it just starts, and they drive away, cut to black, come up on this brightly lit city street.
1 year later.
And the family is living in an apartment in town, and it seems like they've adjusted.
Yeah, the ghosts got what they wanted. Now they're safe. I just keep thinking, like, what? Aren't they pissed at the father? It seems like to me that the father left knowing some shit was going to go down. Because
but see, that's not suggested. I didn't think it was suggested.
It wasn't suggested by anyone, but I'm just logically thinking, why did he leave? Why did he tell mother to be merciful on the kids? Why was he so coy, when the daughter was asking about all this? I mean, he clearly knew everything that was going on, so he would also have to know about the bargain. And then he
I didn't pick
house,
up on
right?
all.
Like, come on.
I didn't pick up on all of that. To finish out the movie, this woman, a neighbor presumably, comes over and gives them food, and then goes back to her own apartment where she talks to her husband, and her husband says, we have to make them comfortable here. We have to make sure they never leave. And it shows on their wall that they have a huge world map with push pins all over it. I have no idea what that means. But the wife says it's almost time for another harvest, and then she and her husband dance, and the credits come up and roll over them dancing.
They've got a big jar.
Yeah, right. Oh, that big jar of the red seeds. That's right. So obviously they're somehow connected to this cult.
Yep.
Did you read about the sequel?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I did. This sets it up, and I kind of thought that you must have, and folks, this podcast is always full of spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers for the sequel, don't listen to this. The dad does have something to do with it.
Oh, he does. He's got to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm kind of interested in the sequel now.
Well, it follows the family. I think that I think that the sequel opens in the 1950s, and we get some more exposition, but then it catches back up with this family, and follows them more. I'd be interested enough to watch it because I think that this was a good movie, and I was invested in it. I was interested until the end. I don't know. I just didn't walk away from it thinking, wow, that was amazing. Like, I have to tell people about it right away. I just thought, yeah, that was good. It was just another good movie that I saw. I probably, a year from now, I may not even remember much about it, but I liked it.
Anymore, I kind of feel this way about these movies. I mean, how many haunted movie, possession, haunted house movie kind of can you see? Especially the modern ones, like how many times have we referenced other films in talking about this movie? Oh yeah, this is just like The Omen. This has got a bit of The Conjuring. Oh yeah, this is kind of the theme of Poltergeist.
Right.
Like eventually they're all kind of mining similar territory, which is why I don't get terribly excited about them.
Right.
And I don't expect too much from them. If they give me a few scares, they show me kind of an interesting story. That's good enough for me, but there's got to be something just crazy stand out about it before I'm going to be like, oh my God, run out and see this one.
Right. That's exactly how I feel about it. Like, it's perfectly serviceable. It's a good movie. And somebody who maybe doesn't watch as many horror movies as we do would probably find this pretty scary. I think it's a scary movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's a scary movie. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I think it is perfectly competent. I think it's well shot. I think it's well directed. I think it's well acted. I think the story is adequate. It kept me engaged, and I really liked the I genuinely was engaged with this family. I was interested in them. I was interested in what was going to happen to them. I really, I don't know if it's right to say I was sad, but it was kind of a gut punch.
It was.
That they got that cute little kid at the end.
It really was.
It made me sad.
You know, it kind of makes you sad all around. Like, just the whole idea, right? This desperate mother who goes to this extreme just to have kids, and then she doesn't want to lose her kids, and so she's stuck in this cycle with, that she is having more and more just to not lose them. And then, of course, you got to pay the devil his due eventually, and that's a shame because this family, like you said, is just so loving and caring, and they're just so good. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate.
I just wanted to, it just occurred to me, Stephen King has a short story that is somewhat similar to this. It's called Grandma. I think it was in Skeleton Crew, maybe Night Shift, I don't remember, but I really like that story. And it deals with satanic fertility issues too. So if you're interested, check that out.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, I've gone kind of down a little rabbit hole of Indonesian horror movies. I'm very curious. Maybe we need to do a theme month at some point. There's a lot that this director has done. Obviously, the sequel to this, he did one apparently called Impetigore that looks interesting.
I've heard of that.
There's like The Queen of Black Magic, and by another director, one that was highly acclaimed called May the Devil Take You.
I've heard of that.
All of these have pretty good ratings, actually, and many of them are remakes of earlier movies. And you know how I kind of like the older movies as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe one day, perhaps around Halloween, we could do the original Satan Slaves, because it looks suitably campy and could be fun. So,
sure.
Yeah. Well, greetings again from Indonesia. Thank you very much for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. You can find us online just by Googling Two Guys and a Chainsaw Podcast. Find our website, find our Twitter feed, find our brand new Instagram page. Drop us a note at any one of those places. Let us know what you thought of this film and this episode and any other movies that we should do in the future. We love taking and fulfilling requests. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.